Have you ever been told you're worthless by the person who should love you most? My mom called me a burden, right to my face. Every birthday, every achievement, ignored, mocked, dismissed. Imagine years of pain piling up in silence. Then one day, I found a way to flip the script. What would you do if the one person meant to protect you became your biggest enemy? I could have stayed broken, but I didn't. I kept a secret that would change everything. Money, power, respect, all hidden in plain sight. The first time I told her, she laughed. She thought I was joking. But when she saw the truth, her face turned pale. Shock, disbelief, fear, all mixed into a single look. And then she tried to deny it, tried to twist it, gaslight me, make me feel small again. But I didn't let her. Not this time. Every insult, every cruel word, I remembered. And now it was my turn. The tables had turned, and she had no idea what was coming. Would you have the courage to stand up after years of being belittled? I didn't just show her the money. I showed her everything. And what happened next? I never saw coming. Every mother-daughter bond has cracks, but some break into pieces. Some secrets are worth keeping until the right moment. The moment I revealed mine, everything changed. I watched her scramble, flustered, powerless, and I smiled. Because for the first time, I held the control. And the revenge. It wasn't violent, it was flawless. She had underestimated me every single time. Have you ever seen someone regret underestimating you? Wait until you see what I did next. Would you stay silent, or take what's yours? This is the story of betrayal, silence, and the sweetest revenge. I grew up in a house where love always felt conditional, weighed against expectations I could never meet. From the moment I could walk, my mom made it clear I was a burden. Not out loud at first, but in the way she sighed when I entered a room, in the way she whispered to my siblings that I was too much trouble. She never said it to my face in a kind way, but the venom in her eyes when I tried to share anything told me everything I needed to know. Every birthday, every holiday, every small achievement ignored. My hard-earned victories weren't celebrated. They were brushed off with, "That's nice, but it doesn't matter." Even school awards or simple successes became reasons for her to roll her eyes. I remember once winning a regional writing competition in high school. I ran home, beaming with pride, imagining a hug or even a smile. She barely looked up from her phone. "Do you think this changes anything?" she said. "You're still going to struggle like the rest of us." And I did struggle, financially, emotionally, socially. I internalized every harsh word, every dismissive glance. My friends' parents praised them for little things, and I watched silently, imagining what it felt like to have that kind of support. But at home, I was nothing but a burden. The word became a shadow that followed me everywhere. By the time I hit college, it had embedded itself into my mind so thoroughly, I almost believed it myself. Almost. I didn't talk about money because I didn't have much. I worked part-time jobs just to survive, just to afford rent and tuition. I didn't complain because complaining would mean acknowledging my burden status, and I didn't want more proof to her that I was useless. I watched my siblings get the best of everything. Trips, expensive gadgets, even private tutoring, while I made do with secondhand textbooks and late-night shifts at a coffee shop. I became invisible in the very home where I should have mattered the most. And yet, I was quietly building something. I had learned early that if I wanted respect, if I wanted power, if I wanted anyone to take me seriously, I couldn't rely on anyone else. Not my mother, not my family. So I kept secrets. Small at first, savings from my part-time jobs, investments in low-risk stocks, but over time, those small seeds grew into something enormous. Something she could never have imagined. I remember the first time I realized it was real. I was 24, living in a modest apartment, counting the balance of my online investment account after months of careful planning. I didn't cheer. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I smiled quietly to myself. Finally, after years of being told I was nothing, I was building something I could call my own, something unassailable, something that would make her regret every harsh word she had ever thrown at me. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Every insult, every dismissal, every cruel comment had been catalogued in my mind. And I knew that when the time came, I wouldn't just show her money. I would show her control, mastery, and undeniable proof that I had risen above her judgment. She had underestimated me, written me off, assumed I would always stumble, always fail, always be a burden. And she couldn't have been more wrong. I started small, testing the waters. I bought a small apartment under my own name, not telling anyone. I learned the nuances of investing, real estate, and business with almost obsessive intensity. Every late night spent researching stocks, analyzing markets, and calculating risks was a step toward the day I would finally reveal my secret. I wanted it to be perfect, indisputable, undeniable. I wanted my mom to see what she had ignored all these years. I remember the day I decided the time had come. I called my mother, pretending to need advice. I wanted her to think nothing had changed. I wanted her to believe that her burdened child was still struggling, still dependent, still invisible. She answered on the first ring, her tone casual, even dismissive. "What is it this time?" she asked. That one line, the same line she had used for years, dripping with annoyance, made my heart beat faster. Not out of fear, but anticipation. I told her I needed help with a financial issue. She sighed audibly. "You never have anything figured out on your own," she said. I didn't respond. I just smiled quietly, imagining the moment I would strip away her condescension, her smug superiority, her unearned sense of control. Years of humiliation had led to this point. Every cruel word, every scoff, every sigh, it had been preparing me for the perfect reveal. I scheduled a meeting, pretending to need advice on investing. She agreed, eager to feel superior, eager to prove she had more knowledge than I did. I watched her arrive, confident, smug, unaware of the storm I had been quietly preparing. She looked at me and said, "You still don't understand money, do you?" That was it, the line that triggered something deep in me. I leaned back, smiled faintly, and said, "Actually, Mom, I think I do." And that was the moment I knew everything was about to change. The first flicker of panic appeared in her eyes, tiny but undeniable. She didn't yet know the scale, the magnitude, the sheer force of what I had been quietly building. I had been a burden all these years, yes, but the burden had grown into a fortune she could never have imagined. And it was finally time for her to realize it. When she stepped into my modest apartment that day, she walked in like a queen, expecting to tower over me, expecting to see struggle written on my face, expecting to feel superior. I could feel the years of condescension in her posture, the subtle smirk that said, "You'll never amount to anything." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't shrink. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and let her take in the scene. It looked ordinary, almost humble, books stacked on the shelves, a clean but simple sofa, a coffee table littered with papers and a laptop. Nothing hinted at the life I had quietly built. And that was exactly the point. Every detail was carefully orchestrated to make her underestimate me, just like she had for years. "Sit," I said calmly, gesturing toward the chair across from me. She sat with an almost imperceptible sigh, like she had just been forced into a meeting she didn't want to attend. "I need your advice," I began, lowering my voice into a tone of mock vulnerability. "I'm thinking of investing some money, but I'm not sure where to start. You know how little I know about these things." Her eyes lit up immediately. Finally, a chance to assert dominance, to remind me who had the experience, who understood the world, who was in control. "Oh, really?" she said, a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "And what kind of money are we talking about?" I leaned forward slightly, keeping my expression neutral. "Enough to change my life," I said softly. Her smile faltered slightly. "Enough to—" She paused, her voice trailing off, trying to gauge how much I meant. "How much money are we talking about?" I allowed a beat of silence. Just one. The tension in the room thickened. I could feel her heartbeat in her chest, subtle but fast. "Mom, enough to make you question everything you thought about me." She laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous. You've never had enough for anything in your life." That laugh, that mocking, condescending laugh, it hit me like a spark against dry kindling. Years of humiliation, every insult, every sigh, every eye roll, it all converged in that single sound. But instead of anger, I felt calm. This is exactly what I wanted. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, thick and official-looking. I placed it on the table carefully, letting the weight of it feel real. "Take a look," I said. Her eyes narrowed as she glanced at the folder. She lifted it gingerly, as though it might bite her. The papers inside were pristine, lined with numbers, statements, and official seals. Every page screamed legitimacy. Every page carried the evidence of years of careful planning, careful investment, and silent accumulation. "Mom," I continued, my voice soft but steady, "do you recognize these?" Her brow furrowed. She flipped through the pages quickly, her hands trembling ever so slightly. This can't be real," she whispered. Her voice cracked. Her disbelief was palpable. The smirk, the condescension, the superiority she had carried into this room evaporated in an instant. I leaned back in my chair, watching her reaction. "It's real. All of it. Every dollar. And yes, it's mine. All mine." Her face went through an emotional tornado: shock, denial, fear, disbelief, panic. She looked at me as if she were seeing a stranger, someone she thought she knew, but who had been hiding a completely different reality. I don't understand," she stammered. How could you?" I smiled faintly. "For years, you told me I was nothing. A burden. Someone who would never make it. You mocked my struggles, ignored my achievements, dismissed me every single day. And I let you. I let you feel superior because I was planning this moment." Tears welled up in her eyes. But I could tell they weren't the proud, happy tears of a mother realizing her child succeeded. No, these were tears of panic, of regret, of someone realizing they had underestimated the very person they thought they could control. You can't just," she faltered, trying to regain composure. But the folder remained on the table, a silent monument to my quiet victories, my hidden life, and my inevitable triumph. Every number, every account, every carefully calculated investment was a statement: I am more than you ever allowed me to be. I could see it then, her panic beginning to morph into fear. The kind of fear that comes from realizing power has shifted. I was no longer her burden. I was no longer under her control. For the first time in my life, I was untouchable and she knew it. And yet, I wasn't finished. I wanted her to feel every ounce of disbelief, every fragment of regret, every fraction of helplessness that she had ever inflicted on me. Because for years, she had made me doubt myself, had made me feel small, had made me feel powerless. Now, the tables had turned. I leaned forward, letting my calm authority fill the room. "Mom, do you remember all the times you told me I'd never amount to anything? Do you remember the way you said I was a burden? Well, I let the words hang in the air. That was your mistake." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Words failed her. Her hands trembled. She looked at me, really looked at me, and in that moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear, pure and unfiltered. I smiled again, quietly, almost tenderly. "You see, Mom, I wasn't nothing. I was planning. I was preparing. I was waiting for the right moment. And now the moment is here." And in that instant, I knew our relationship had changed forever. Nothing would ever be the same. She had underestimated me. She had mocked me. And now, she would see what happens when a burden becomes unstoppable. Her hands shook as she clutched the folder tighter, as though sheer physical force could undo what she was seeing. I watched her, quiet, letting her panic unfold in slow motion. Every subtle twitch, every stammered word, every flash of disbelief fueled a quiet, simmering satisfaction inside me. Years of feeling small, of being dismissed, of being labeled a burden. Every memory surged through me, and I allowed myself a private, victorious smile. This isn't possible," she whispered, almost to herself. Her eyes darted from the papers to me and back again, desperately seeking some hidden trick, some loophole that could explain away the undeniable truth. But there was no trick. There was only me. And now she had to face it. I leaned back, folding my hands calmly on the table. "It's all real," I said softly. "Every single dollar, every investment, every property, every account, all of it belongs to me." Her lips quivered. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She turned pale, her usually confident posture crumbling. I realized then that she had never faced this kind of defeat in her life. Not in the way she had forced me to feel defeated every day. The fear in her eyes was intoxicating, not because I wanted to punish her cruelly, but because it was finally justice in its purest form. You have no idea what you're doing," she finally managed, her voice cracking. "You don't know how to handle this. She stopped, realizing her words were empty threats, powerless against the reality staring her in the face. I shook my head slowly. "No, Mom. You don't understand. I know exactly what I'm doing. I've been planning this for years. Every insult, every eye roll, every time you made me feel worthless, it all led to this moment." She sank slightly into the chair, her fingers pressing into her forehead as if trying to squeeze away the overwhelming truth. "But why?" she whispered, a mix of fear and desperation in her tone. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why hide this?" I met her gaze steadily, letting the weight of my response land with full force. "Because if I had told you, you would have dismissed it. You would have mocked it. You would have called it a fluke or luck. You needed to see the full scale, Mom. You needed to realize just how wrong you were about me." Her breathing quickened, and I could feel the tension coiling in the room like a living thing. She wanted to argue, to challenge me, to reassert her dominance, but she couldn't. Every attempt would crumble under the sheer truth of what I held. I had become the unstoppable force she had spent years trying to suppress. "Years," she muttered, shaking her head. "Years I thought I knew you. Years I thought you were helpless. And you built all of this in secret." "Yes," I said simply. "In secret. While you were busy telling me I was nothing, I was quietly building a life you couldn't even imagine. A life where I didn't need your approval, your guidance, or your recognition. A life where I controlled everything. And now, I let the pause stretch, letting the suspense build in the air between us. You're seeing it." Her lips parted, and I could see the fear beginning to mix with anger. Anger always comes when shock starts to settle in, and she was no exception. "You think money makes you better than me?" she spat finally, trying to mask the panic. "Do you think that will fix everything?" I shook my head, smiling faintly. "It's not about being better, Mom. It's about being recognized. It's about finally having the respect you refused to give me. And it's about showing you the burden you created was never what you thought it was." Her face twisted in frustration, in disbelief, in a mixture of emotions she had no idea how to process. She had never faced a child like this before, one who didn't cower, one who didn't beg for approval, one who turned her cruelty into motivation. I could see her mind racing, trying to calculate how this had happened, how I had achieved what she had dismissed as impossible. And the more she realized, the more panicked she became. Every proud, dismissive statement she had ever made now came back to her in waves of regret and helplessness. I don't know what to say," she stammered, finally lowering her eyes. This can't be happening." "Yes, it is," I said softly. "And this is only the beginning. You see, Mom, there's more than just money at stake. There's control, there's justice, and there's closure. You can't undo the past, but I can make sure you understand how it feels to be powerless, to be underestimated, to be dismissed." Her lips pressed together, and I could see the first cracks of desperation forming. She wanted to lash out, to defend herself, but she couldn't. The power had shifted. The burden had become unstoppable. I stood up, walking slowly around the table, letting my presence fill the room, letting her realize that I was no longer the child she could intimidate. "Do you remember every time you called me worthless? Every time you told me I would never succeed? Every single word you said that made me doubt myself?" She nodded, swallowing hard. I remember. "And now," I continued, my voice calm, precise, yet heavy with tension, "you will understand what it feels like to be on the other side. You will feel the weight of underestimating someone who was quietly preparing to surpass every expectation, even yours." Her hands shook again. The room felt smaller, charged with the electricity of years of pent-up emotion, finally colliding with reality. She realized she was witnessing not just a fortune reveal, but the beginning of a reckoning she had never imagined. And at that moment, I knew the real game had begun. Her breathing was shallow, ragged, as though the air itself had betrayed her. I watched every subtle twitch of her body, every flash of panic in her eyes, and I let the silence between us stretch. Silence can be heavier than words, and right now it was crushing her. 4 years, she had controlled every conversation, every decision, every narrative in her house. Now, she had no control at all. You really kept all of this from me? She finally managed, her voice trembling. All these years you hid it? Yes, I said simply. All these years. While you were busy mocking me, while you were busy telling me I would never make it, I was quietly preparing. Every small job, every extra hour, every investment, it all led to this moment. And you had no idea. She shook her head violently, backing slightly as if distance could protect her. But why? Why would you hide something so important? Do you think money is all it takes to fix everything? I walked slowly around her, my presence filling the room. It's not about the money, I said calmly. It's about finally being seen, finally being respected. You treated me like I was invisible, Mom. You treated me like a burden. And now you are seeing the truth you refused to acknowledge for so long. Her eyes narrowed, trying to find an angle, trying to regain some semblance of power. You think this gives you the right to judge me? She hissed. Do you think money makes you better than me? I smiled faintly, almost tenderly, letting the tension build with every word. No, Mom. I don't need money to judge you. You judged yourself long ago, with every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every time you made me feel worthless. I'm just showing you what you created. A child who could be underestimated, mocked, and dismissed, and yet here I am. Her lips quivered, her panic rising into anger. I gave you everything. I worked hard for this family. And you think I treated you unfairly? I laughed softly, the sound calm but cutting. Gave me everything? No, Mom. You gave me judgment, criticism, and a label burden. That's what you gave me. You gave me a lifetime of doubt, of humiliation, of feeling small. And every day, I carried it quietly, preparing. You never saw it coming because you never really saw me. She looked at me, her face a storm of emotions. Shock, fear, guilt, and anger all colliding. You don't understand what it's like to raise a family, she said finally, voice breaking. You don't know the sacrifices I made. I shook my head slowly. Oh, I know exactly what it's like, Mom. I watched. I remember every sleepless night you ignored me, every opportunity you gave to others instead of me, every insult disguised as advice. I carried all of it. And now, the burden has shifted. Her panic became palpable. She fumbled with the folder, flipping through pages as if the numbers themselves could defend her. But the evidence was indisputable. Every account, every investment, every property, legally and securely mine. The weight of years of meticulous preparation finally had a physical form she could hold, but couldn't control. You planned all of this, she whispered, disbelief and fear in her tone. All these years, just to prove me wrong. Yes, I said simply. I planned. I prepared. I waited. Every insult, every mocking word, every time you told me I would fail, it was fuel. And now, here we are. You are seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time in your life. And it scares you. She trembled, realizing that she could not argue her way out of this. She had underestimated me for decades, and now she was powerless to change reality. She had no allies here, no room to twist the narrative, no way to diminish the truth. And yet, a flicker of desperation appeared. Her eyes narrowed, and she tried one last tactic, manipulation. Maybe we can work together, she suggested, her voice trembling but calculating. You don't need to do this alone. Maybe we can share it, like a family. I smiled faintly, calm and steady. Mom, this isn't about working together. This is about recognizing the past, owning the consequences of your words, and understanding the truth. You created the burden, and now you will live with the knowledge of its power. Alone. Her face went pale, and she realized, truly realized, that this wasn't just a fortune reveal. It was the beginning of a reckoning. She had underestimated the person she had dismissed for so long, and now she would see the full extent of what happens when someone underestimated finds their power. For the first time, I could see real fear in her eyes. Not the fleeting fear of a child misbehaving, but the deep, bone-chilling fear of realizing control had shifted. And that fear, That fear was delicious. I leaned forward, voice quiet but sharp. Mom, do you remember all the times you said I would never succeed? All the times you told me I was a burden? Every single one of those moments, they led to this. And now, you will see what a burden really can become. She gasped, her hands shaking, her mind racing. She could see the storm coming, though she didn't yet know its full force. And I let her sit there, in that moment of helplessness, knowing that this was only the beginning. The next step would be the true test, her reaction, her desperation, her attempts to reclaim control. And I would watch, silently, as years of planning began to unfold. Her trembling hands gripped the edge of the table as though it were the only anchor keeping her from sinking into panic. I watched her carefully, noting every micro-expression, every twitch of anxiety, every flicker of anger laced with fear. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment when all the humiliation and dismissal she had inflicted over the years would collide with the truth she could no longer deny. Please, she began, her voice small, fragile, almost pleading. Maybe we don't have to do this like this. Maybe you could share. Maybe we could work together. Her words wavered, a mixture of desperation and cunning. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to regain control over a situation she had always dominated. I leaned back slightly, studying her. Calm, composed, untouchable. Mom, this isn't a negotiation, I said softly. You had your chance to see me, truly see me, when I was building everything quietly. You mocked me, dismissed me, called me a burden, and now the burden has become unstoppable. Her eyes narrowed, and a flicker of anger replaced some of her fear. You think this is about revenge, she spat. You think money gives you the right to humiliate me? I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that sends shivers because it's calm, precise, and terrifyingly certain. It's not about money, I said quietly. It's about justice, about acknowledgement, about you finally understanding the consequences of underestimating someone you dismissed for years. Her breathing grew rapid. Her voice shook as she spoke again. You don't know what it's like to raise a family. You don't know the sacrifices I made. You have no idea. I know exactly, I interrupted calmly. I watched. I remember. Every insult, every condescending glance, every time you made me feel small. I cataloged it all and I waited. And now, Mom, it's time for you to understand what it feels like to be powerless, to be underestimated, to be dismissed. She recoiled slightly, as though my words physically struck her. The tension in the room thickened. I could feel the weight of years of pent-up humiliation, now fully reversed, pressing down on her chest. Panic began to seep into her every gesture, every syllable. You can't just do this. You can't take control like this, she exclaimed, rising slightly from her chair, her hands flailing in agitation. This is my house, my family, my everything. I remained seated, calm, letting her outburst play out. No, Mom, this is your reckoning. You've always wanted to control everything. Me, my choices, my life. Now, the tables have turned. You are seeing the child you called a burden, standing taller than you ever imagined. Her panic deepened. She realized that no matter what she said or did, nothing would undo the years of careful planning I had executed quietly, methodically, flawlessly. Every late night of research, every financial decision, every hidden investment now culminated in this moment. She could sense it. She was cornered, helpless, facing consequences she had never envisioned. She tried one last tactic, a desperate ploy to regain influence. Maybe it's not too late, she stammered, her voice wavering between pleading and commanding. Maybe we can fix this. Maybe I can help you manage it. Together. I smiled, a calm but sharp edge to it. Mom, this isn't about fixing anything. This is about truth, justice, and finally holding you accountable. And accountability doesn't need your help. You had your chance to be a supportive mother. You squandered it. This is the outcome of your choices. Her lips trembled. Her face twisted into disbelief, rage, and fear. She realized that she had not just lost control of the moment, she had lost control over me entirely. And there was no way back. You don't understand, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I did everything for you. I worked, I sacrificed, I interrupted again, letting my voice carry the weight of every year she had dismissed me. You did everything for appearances. You did everything to control, to belittle, to make me feel like I was nothing. You didn't see me. You never saw me. And now, Mom, the person you dismissed has become the one with all the power. She sank back into her chair, finally silent, her face pale, her hands shaking uncontrollably. I could see it, the full realization of her helplessness, the dawning understanding that she could not manipulate, could not control, could not intimidate me any longer. And in that silence, in that suspended moment of panic and disbelief, I knew that the first phase of my plan had succeeded. The fortune reveal had not just shocked her, it had broken the foundation of her assumed dominance. Every insult, every belittling comment, every dismissive remark she had ever made now rebounded onto her in full force. I leaned back, letting the calm authority of the moment fill the room. Mom, consider this the first lesson, I said softly. Power isn't given. Respect isn't demanded. They are earned. And for years, I earned mine quietly without you noticing. Now you will notice. Every day, every moment, until you understand fully what it means to underestimate someone you called a burden. Her eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline, any escape, any justification. But there was none. She realized she was facing not just a fortune, but the emergence of a person she had never truly known, the person she had underestimated, belittled, and betrayed. And that realization, finally, filled her with a fear she had never felt before. The first phase was complete. The fortune had been revealed, the panic had begun, and the foundation for the ultimate reckoning had been laid. And I sat back calm, knowing the next steps would bring the full weight of her fear, guilt, and desperation to the surface. I didn't speak for a long time, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted her to sit in the silence she never let me have. My mother had always filled silence with her voice. Commands, criticism, reminders that I wasn't enough. Now she sat surrounded by a silence so thick it felt like punishment. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled. She didn't dare look up at me. Mom, I finally said, quietly but with unshakable weight. We're not done. Her eyes snapped up, full of terror. What do you mean? What more do you want? You humiliated me already. Isn't that enough? I tilted my head, studying her. For a lifetime of humiliation? No. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Something inside her broke. A realization that she was no longer dealing with the child she could bully, but the adult she could never control. Mom, for once in your life, you're going to listen. And for the first time, she actually did. The panic underneath her skin. She clasped her hands together as if she were praying. Her voice came out thin, strained, cracking under pressure. Please don't do anything rash. We're family. Families fight. Families say things they don't mean. Really? I whispered. Did you not mean it when you told people I was a liability? Did you not mean it when you said I'd never succeed? Did you not mean it when you called me a burden? She flinched. A sharp, involuntary twitch, proof that the word, burden, finally cut her the way it always cut me. I was angry. You were cruel, I corrected softly. And the difference matters. She tried again. I didn't know you were capable of this. Of success, I said. Or of standing up to you. She didn't answer, because the truth hurt her too much. My plan begins, quietly, like a storm forming. I leaned forward, placing my elbows on my knees, staring at her the way she once stared at me when she wanted me to feel ashamed. Mom, I'm going to fix something, I said. But not in the way you think. Her face paled. What are you going to do? The corner of my mouth curved into a slow, calm smile. First, I'm going to show you what real power feels like. She stiffened. Is this blackmail? No, I replied. It's accountability. A word she had never respected in her life. The family meeting she never saw coming. Call them, I said. Your precious circle. Your golden son. Your sister. Everyone you've ever bragged to. Her face contorted in horror. No, you can't. You will, I said calmly. And you will tell them I'm coming over. Tonight. Why? She whispered. Because tonight, I said slowly, we're going to rewrite the narrative you built about me. She shook her head violently. I won't let you embarrass me like that. I raised an eyebrow. So you can be embarrassed? That's new. She glared, wounded and furious. But she knew she couldn't refuse. You have two choices, Mom, I said. Either you call them or I do. And trust me, my version will be far less polite. Her silence was the silence of defeat. And then, shaking, she reached for her phone. The fear she tries to hide. While she dialed, her hands trembled, so much she almost dropped the phone. Every word she said was coated in shakiness she could not disguise. Yes, yes, everyone come over. It's urgent. No, I can't explain. Just get here. All of you. When she hung up, she looked at me like she didn't recognize the person sitting across from her. Why are you doing this? She whispered. For the same reason you did everything, I replied. To make sure the story benefits me. But you don't have to destroy me. I leaned back. Don't I? After everything. Her lips trembled. She looked small, pathetic even. But I didn't feel pity. She had never given me any. The shattering truth she never expected. Mom, I said quietly, you were so busy calling me useless that you never noticed I surpassed you years ago. That's not true, she whispered. Isn't it? Where were you when I started my first company? Where were you when I worked nights, building everything? Where were you when I cried alone after you told people I'd never amount to anything? She covered her face with her hands. Tears slipped through her fingers. Stop, please stop. The child in me, the one she neglected, wanted to stop. But the adult in me, the one she created through cruelty, did not. You didn't raise me, I said softly. You shaped me into the weapon now pointed at your lies. The doorbell and the shift in power. The doorbell rang. Her relatives' voices echoed outside. Everyone's here, my mother whispered. Her voice was pure dread. Good, I said calmly. Let the truth begin. She looked at me with the eyes of someone standing on the edge of a cliff. Please don't ruin me. I stood up slowly, adjusting my jacket, composure unbreakable. Mom, I said quietly, you ruined yourself the moment you called me a burden. Her eyes glistened with tears she could no longer hide. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear her whispering to herself. God, what have I done? But it was too late. The reckoning had begun. The doorbell echoed through the apartment, a sound sharper than any accusation. My mother froze, her face pale and trembling. She looked at me, eyes wide with fear and disbelief, realizing she had called them here at my insistence. The family she had spent decades trying to impress, the ones she had used to measure her own superiority over me, they were about to see me, not as the burden she had always insisted I was, but as the force she had underestimated. I opened the door slowly, stepping aside to let them in. My mother's siblings, cousins, and even a few neighbors shuffled inside, unaware of the storm waiting for them. She tried to force a smile, a mask of control she no longer had, but her panic was obvious. Mom, everyone's here, I said softly, letting the words hang in the air. Shall we begin? Her voice cracked. I don't think. Quiet, I interrupted calmly. This isn't about you. It's about the truth. The silence before the storm. The room fell silent. Eyes shifted nervously, glances exchanged. They were used to my mother commanding attention, manipulating narratives, controlling perceptions. But tonight, the air was charged differently. Tonight, I controlled it. I pulled the folder from the table, placing it where everyone could see. The weight of years of planning, work, and accumulation radiated from it like an undeniable truth. No one needed me to explain it. The numbers, statements, and accounts were evidence enough. Gasps filled the room. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My mother's face twisted in disbelief and shame. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I looked around at them, letting my calm, steady presence dominate the space. You all know me as the child my mother always warned you about. The one she said would never amount to anything. The one she called a burden. They nodded slowly, some uneasy, some shocked. I continued. And now you can see the truth. The child she dismissed, the one she underestimated, is standing here with a fortune she never imagined I could achieve. Every investment, every business, every property mine. All mine. And I built it in secret. Reactions, fear, shock and awkwardness. The room shifted. My mother's face turned from disbelief to panic. Her relatives stared, murmuring quietly, unable to comprehend the scale of what they were witnessing. Her power, the power she wielded so confidently for decades, crumbled in the span of seconds. A cousin muttered under his breath, "I didn't know she could do this." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. I didn't know." I raised a finger, stopping her. "You did know. Every insult, every criticism, every time you called me worthless, you knew. And that's why this moment is so perfect." She opened her mouth again, trying to speak, trying to regain control, but the room no longer belonged to her. It belonged to me. The verbal strike. I leaned slightly forward, voice calm but sharp. "Do you remember all the birthdays you ignored? All the holidays you pretended I didn't exist? All the achievements you brushed off as meaningless? Every single word you said, every glance you threw, every sigh you heaved, it fueled this. It created me. The child you called a burden is now the one controlling the narrative." Her eyes darted around, searching for someone, anyone, to side with her. But they didn't. Their eyes were on me, witnessing the proof, feeling the tension, sensing the shift in power. "You have two choices," I said softly. "You can continue to deny the truth and risk everyone seeing your cruelty, or you can acknowledge it and accept the consequences." Her lips trembled. "Consequences, what do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "You'll see soon enough." The slow realization. The realization hit her in waves. The family that had once reinforced her authority now looked at her differently. They began to whisper among themselves, confused and judgmental. For decades, she had been the center of control. And now she was vulnerable. Her panic began to rise, and I watched it quietly, like a storm gathering force. Every denial she tried, every feeble attempt at justification, only made her look smaller, weaker. "You," she finally whispered, voice barely audible. "You're going to what?" I leaned back, calm, measured, letting the weight of my presence fill the room. "I'm going to make sure you understand what it feels like to underestimate someone you thought would always be beneath you. I'm going to make sure you see the consequences of your cruelty. And I'm going to do it quietly, methodically, perfectly." Her body stiffened. The panic was complete now. She realized the game had changed entirely, and there was no way to reverse it. The plan moves forward. Later that night, after the relatives had left, my mother sat in silence, hands trembling, face pale. She couldn't speak. Every insult, every dismissal, every callous remark she had made to me echoed back at her, magnified. And I knew the next phase had begun. The revenge wasn't about humiliation. It was about teaching a lesson she would never forget. Every move I made from this point on would remind her of the consequences of underestimating me. I leaned back in my chair, a calm storm of purpose and satisfaction. Years of patience, planning, and careful execution had brought me here. And now, nothing could stop the next steps. The true reckoning was only beginning. My mother didn't sleep that night. I heard her pacing the hallway long after the relatives left. Every step was shaky, uneven. The footsteps of someone who had just seen her entire world collapse in front of her. But what she didn't know was that her downfall had only just begun. I wasn't finished. Not even close. This wasn't revenge out of anger. It was a carefully engineered reckoning. A consequence for every year she crushed my spirit, every insult she delivered with a smile, every time she convinced people I was nothing more than a burden. Now she would experience, in slow motion, the collapse she once wished upon me. The morning after, her new reality. I walked into the kitchen the next morning. My mother sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her eyes were swollen from crying, not that she would ever admit it. She looked up at me like she expected a sentence, a verdict, something that would give her hope. Instead, I said nothing. I let the silence weigh on her, the same suffocating silence I grew up sitting in, waiting, hoping, wishing she would notice me. She finally spoke, voice barely a whisper. "What happens now?" I didn't answer her question. I asked my own. "Tell me, Mom, why did you call me a burden?" She froze, like she hadn't expected that question, like she hoped I would never bring it up again. She swallowed hard. I didn't mean it. I was angry. No, I said calmly. You meant it. You said it with pride. You said it in front of people. You said it because it made you feel superior. Her lips trembled. It was just a word you used to define my entire worth. She put her head in her hands. And now everyone knows the truth, she whispered. That you're successful and I'm exposed. I finished for her. She let out a shaky breath. The consequences start quietly. I didn't shout. I didn't rage. Revenge isn't loud. It's calculated. I picked up my phone and placed it on the table. I've made arrangements, I said. Her eyes snapped up. What kind of arrangements? You'll see. Her panic rose instantly. What did you do? I took a slow breath. Mom, you spent your whole life trying to destroy my reputation. Now I'm about to correct the record. She covered her mouth. No, please don't tell people. You already told people, I interrupted. You just never told them the truth. She began to cry, real, terrified crying, the kind I had never seen from her before. You can't do this. They won't respect me. They'll think I'm a failure. They'll know, I corrected. Not think. Her tears fell harder. The phone call. I stepped away from her and dialed a number. She watched me, breath trembling. Who are you calling? She whispered. I put one finger in the air, wait. The call connected. Hi, yes. I'm confirming our meeting for tonight. Yes, she'll be there. My mother's breath caught. Meeting? With who? I ended the call and looked at her. With everyone you lied to. Her face drained of color. You said they knew, she whispered. They knew your version, I said. Tonight, they hear mine. She stumbled backward, gripping the counter for support. You're going to destroy me, she choked. I'm going to reveal you, I corrected softly. And you'll destroy yourself. The community gossip explodes. By noon, the calls began. Relatives, neighbors, people she used to gossip with. Her phone buzzed nonstop. What happened last night? Is it true? Did you really hide everything about your child? Why didn't you tell us they were so successful? Why were you talking behind their back all these years? Every call chipped away at the image she spent her entire life building. Every call was another reminder. She wasn't in control anymore. At one point, she threw her phone onto the couch and screamed, I can't do this. I can't face everyone. I stepped closer. You should have thought about that before you labeled your own child a burden. Her breathing broke, collapsing into sobs. The financial truth she never expected. I placed a stack of papers on the table. Her eyes widened in confusion. What is this? Your debts, I said. She blinked. My what? Your debts, I repeated. Bank loans, credit cards, unpaid bills you tried to hide. Her face twisted in horror. How do you know? Because I bought them, I said. She staggered back as if I'd hit her. You what? I sat down calmly. Every financial mistake you made, every loan you took under the table, every overdue payment. They're all in my name now. Her hands flew to her mouth. No, you didn't, you can't. Why would you? To show you, I said quietly, that the burden you mocked for years is now the one who owns your freedom. Her knees buckled. She collapsed into the chair behind her. What are you going to do to me? I leaned forward, watching the terror spread across her face. Nothing, I said. She frowned through her tears. Nothing. That's the punishment. You're going to live every single day knowing that the child you belittled controls the life you thought you ruled. She sobbed uncontrollably. The public meeting, her final humiliation. At 7 p.m., I drove her to the hall. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't open the door. Inside, everyone was waiting. The relatives, the neighbors, the same people she spent years poisoning against me. Their eyes turned as we walked in. Whispers spread instantly. She clung to me, voice trembling. Please don't do this. I gently moved her hand away. This isn't for revenge, I said softly. It's for truth. Her breath broke. Her shoulders shook. I stepped to the front of the room. Everyone here knows my mother's version of me, I began. But tonight, you'll know mine. Her sob echoed behind me. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. And for the first time in her life, my mother couldn't escape the consequences of her actions. The hall was silent, every eye on me. The air was thick with anticipation, with tension, with decades of betrayal finally about to erupt in full view. I stepped forward, calm, composed, radiating control, while my mother's trembling figure trailed behind me. She looked small, vulnerable, utterly exposed, like the mighty figure she had always tried to be had finally crumbled to dust. Everyone here knows the story they were told. I began, voice steady and cold. The story of a child who would never succeed, who was a burden, who could never be anything. That's the story my mother told you for years. And for years you believed it. Heads shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs began. Eyes widened. Some tried to hide their surprise. Others whispered to their neighbors. But the truth, I continued, holding up the folder, is very different. The shock of revelation. I placed the folder on the table and began presenting the facts. Every account, every investment, every property I owned. The room gasped in disbelief. The relatives I had grown up listening to my mother manipulate, the people who had reinforced her authority over me, now looked at her with shock. She did all of this, a cousin whispered. She's been hiding all this. My mother tried to interject, her lips trembling. No, you don't understand. She'll, I said, raising my hand. Let the facts speak for themselves. I slowly laid out the timeline, the growth, the patience, the deliberate planning. Every gasp in the room fueled my calm satisfaction. Every whispered question, every disbelief, every glance of incredulity on my mother's face was proof that her reign of control was over. The verbal strike, Mother exposed. Then I turned to her. Mom, I said, my voice soft but deadly precise. You told everyone I was worthless. You told me I would never succeed. You told me I was a burden. You made sure the world saw me as nothing, and yet here I stand, in front of everyone you lied to, proving you wrong. Her lips quivered, words failing her. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried to speak, but nothing came out. Every insult, every dismissive look, every belittling comment, it built this moment, I continued. You created a child who was underestimated, dismissed, and broken, and yet here I am, standing taller than you ever imagined. She looked around the hall, panic rising as realization sank in. The relatives whispered among themselves, some nodding in disbelief, some staring at her like she was suddenly smaller than they had ever seen. Her control, the illusion she had maintained for decades, evaporated in the face of undeniable truth. The emotional punch. I could see her mind racing, trying to salvage dignity, trying to regain control, but it was gone. And in that moment, I let the quiet rage that had simmered for years rise to the surface. You called me a burden, I said softly, letting each word hang in the air. You told me I was nothing. You belittled me in front of family, in front of neighbors, in front of anyone who would listen. And now, for the first time, you are powerless. The child you dismissed owns more than you could ever imagine. And you have to live with that truth. Every day. Her sobs broke into full cries, and I realized she had truly understood the weight of her actions. The crowd's eyes shifted to her, no longer supportive, no longer unquestioning. The respect she once commanded was gone. She was exposed, shamed, and powerless in a way she had inflicted on me for decades. The final blow, her desperation. I didn't know, she whispered through tears, clutching her face. Yes, you did, I said calmly. You knew, Mom. Every single word, every look, every judgment was intentional. And now you see the consequence. Her eyes pleaded. Please, I just want things to go back to normal. I shook my head slowly. No, Mom. Things don't go back. Normal is gone. You created this version of me through neglect, cruelty, and mockery. Now you have to face the life you built for yourself, a life where your power no longer exists. Her knees buckled. She sank into the chair. The sobs were uncontrollable now. Her own family looked on, silently witnessing the collapse of a woman they had never questioned until now. The aftermath, power shifted. I turned to the relatives, voice calm but assertive. Everything she told you about me was a lie. The child she dismissed, the one she labeled a burden, is now standing in front of you as proof. Every insult, every doubt, every judgment she cast is now turned to dust. Whispers spread across the room. Heads shook. Some relatives even nodded, realizing the truth they had never seen. My mother tried to stand, tried to interject, but no one listened. The power she had clung to for decades was gone. Her voice, once commanding, was now drowned out by the undeniable reality of my success. I smiled faintly, letting the moment stretch. Years of humiliation, years of dismissal, years of being underestimated, all of it culminated in this. I had won. The final lesson, her silence. I stepped back, letting her sit in the wreckage of her pride. No words could fix this. No apologies could undo decades of belittlement. She had been exposed, powerless, and forced to reckon with the reality she had created. I looked at her calmly. This is your punishment, Mom. Not humiliation. Not anger. Not spite. Just truth. And truth is heavier than anything you could have imagined. Her tears fell freely. Her breathing was shallow. And in that silence, I knew she would never again underestimate me. The child she called a burden had become unstoppable. The house was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a home filled with warmth, but the heavy, suffocating quiet of a storm past, leaving wreckage behind. My mother sat at the dining table, hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She didn't speak. She didn't move. She couldn't. The truth I had revealed, the calculated patience and planning, had dismantled her authority and pride completely. The labels, the mockery, the dismissive words she had spent decades wielding, all of it now returned to her, magnified and undeniable. I sat across from her, calm, steady, the weight of the moment not in words, but in presence. You called me a burden, I said softly. Her lips quivered. She didn't respond. You judged me. You dismissed me. You humiliated me. And now, you are living with the consequences. Her hands shook as she brought them to her face. Tears fell silently, the kind that are too late, too deep, and too full of regret to be hidden. The silence of power shifted. The house felt different. Every corner, every familiar object, carried the weight of history. And in that history, she realized she no longer controlled the narrative. She had spent years dictating who I was, how I should live, what my worth was, and now that control was gone. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cruel. I was the living proof of patience, of perseverance, of quiet strength. Do you understand now? I asked. Her trembling was so profound it made my chest ache. Not for her, but because the lesson was brutal, necessary. I never realized, she stammered, voice barely audible. You never. I didn't. Mom, I said softly, this isn't about realization anymore. It's about consequence. You taught me every single thing I needed to know about patience, about planning, about endurance. You thought you were shaping me, but really, you were creating the strength I needed to succeed. Her eyes filled with disbelief. You've forgiven me? I shook my head. No. Forgiveness is not part of the lesson. Understanding the weight of your actions is. And knowing that your judgment cannot touch me anymore, that is the consequence you will live with for the rest of your life. The full reckoning. Over the next few weeks, the fallout continued. Relatives whispered. Neighbors gossiped. Even friends began to see the shift in power. My mother was no longer the untouchable figure she had been. She couldn't manipulate narratives. She couldn't control perception. Her reputation had been rebuilt, not in rumor, but in undeniable truth. I watched her try to regain dignity, try to repair relationships, try to convince the world, and herself, that she had always been fair. But the truth doesn't lie, and she had been confronted with it fully, painfully, in front of the very people who had once reinforced her authority. The personal transformation. For me, nothing had changed outwardly. I still walked the same streets, still held the same keys, still managed the same businesses. But inside, everything had changed. The years of belittlement, the mockery, the endless reminders of my supposed insignificance, they had all transformed into a quiet, unshakable confidence. I realized something crucial. Power is not given. Respect is not demanded. It is earned quietly, diligently, relentlessly. And once earned, it can't be taken away. Not by fear, not by judgment, not even by the people who once claimed you were nothing. The lesson learned. I never sought revenge out of anger or hatred. Revenge, if done correctly, is about balance. It's about showing the world, and the people who try to diminish you, that truth cannot be hidden forever. It's about teaching lessons without cruelty, yet making the impact undeniable. My mother learned her lesson. She learned what it meant to underestimate someone. She learned what it meant to face the consequences of every careless word, every dismissive glance, every belittling comment. And I learned my own. No one has the right to define your worth. No one has the authority to decide your value. And patience, strategy, and unwavering self-belief are more powerful than any judgment passed in anger or ignorance. The new beginning. Weeks later, my life continued, but it was different. The tension that had haunted me for decades was gone. The child she called a burden had become unstoppable. Every step I took, every decision I made, carried the quiet strength of someone who had endured patiently, endured wisely, and now, finally, had full control of her own destiny. I never looked back. Not with malice, not with regret, just with clarity. The burden was never mine. The burden had always been hers, and now she would carry it forever.